Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFA Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. I want to follow up on the story that we brought you yesterday. It was a breaking story yesterday. We had Todd Starnes, Fox radio news commentator and Fox News contributor on this program to talk about this. And this has to do with an email, a 14-page rant, a 14-page email that was sent out by a Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich. I've got a copy of the email right in front of me. He's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Campbell. And again, as I mentioned, according to his LinkedIn profile, he is a Boy Scout leader. He's an assistant den master, whatever the exact term is. He is a leader in the Boy Scouts. And he is saying in his email that we, the American Family Association, are a domestic hate group because we are an anti-gay group. That is, we are against the normalization of homosexual behavior. We are against the legalization of same-sex marriage. We think it's bad for people. We think that that's a behavior that's immoral, it's unhealthy, it's unnatural. We think it's unconscionable to put kids in homes where they are deprived, they are deliberately being deprived of a mom or a dad. It's unconscionable to do that to children. So yes, we are against the homosexual agenda, but it is because of what we are for. We are for natural marriage. We are for enduring marriages. We are for natural marriage. We are for optimal nurturing environments for children. So, you know, this Jack Rich guy, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich, I mean, the reality is here, if the American Family Association is a domestic hate group, then so are the Boy Scouts of America. So what's he doing? He is a leader in what he himself would have to call a domestic hate group. By his definition, since the Boy Scouts are as opposed to the homosexual agenda as AFA is, they will not allow open homosexuals to serve as leaders. They won't allow homosexuals in the scout troop. Why? Because they care about the sexual integrity and moral formation of the boys that are in their care. They care about those things. So they want leaders for their boys that are going to model what mature, wise, self-restrained behavior looks like, what mature behavior looks like. And they want to protect these kids from being taken advantage of. We know the higher rate of incidence of child molestation among those in the homosexual community. They're responsible for 1/3 of all sexual molestation offenses against children, even though they comprise about 2%, 3% max of the population. So they offend against children at 10 times the rate that the heterosexual population does. Boy Scouts have every reason in the world not to allow homosexuals to serve in leadership roles in their organization. This guy's a leader. He's serving in what he himself would have to call a domestic hate group. What's he doing there? And why did he give the Boy Scouts a pass? Why does he go after AFA? Why does he go after FRC and give the Boy Scouts a pass? Because they are guilty of the same things that caused him to label us a domestic hate group. Now, I've got a column up today at instantanalysis.net if you'd like to read it, a column about this email from this Jack Rich fellow. I want to walk through a little bit of the content with you. But again, this is what, and this is sent out to leaders. I'm looking at the list of leaders. These are all officers in the United States military. There's about 30 of them here. I didn't count all the names, but there's several dozen names he sent this out to, chain of command. He says, this is what he says, leaders, and he refers to them as leaders in the email, just want to ensure everyone is somewhat educated on some of the groups out there that do not share our Army values. Now, the first groups he lists, Family Research Council and the American Family Association. So he just flat out on page 1 says, look, I want to talk to you about some groups that do not share Army values. First groups he talk about, FRC and AFA. We see behaviors that are inconsistent with Army values. Don't just walk by, do the right thing, and address the concern before it becomes a problem. So you find somebody that is a supporter, you find an officer, an enlisted man that believes in the values or the mission of FRC, AFA, you better land on them like a falling safe. Stop them. Get right up in their grill. Do not let them move forward with their pro-family values in the U.S. Army. It is against our values to be for the family. It's against our values to be for natural marriage. It's against our values. And this is what he's saying. He's saying, look, it's against Army values to support religion, to support Christianity, to support faith, to support chaplains in the U.S. military. It's against Army values to support natural marriage, to support marriage as a union of one man and one woman. It's against our Army values to be for optimal nurturing environments for children, because that's what AFA and FRC stand for. And he identifies us as groups that do not share our Army values. Well, if that's what the Army has become, if it's what Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich says it's become, this is a huge monster problem. And Jan, if you would, could you get in the control room there and get up to a mic? Because I want to ask you to explain to our listeners what you did to try to get somebody on, to try to get Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich on here to talk about his email, get somebody from the Pentagon on to talk about his email. Let me know when you're ready to chat. So anyway, he's identifying AFA as a group that does not share Army values. And the point that I make in my column, hey, we share Army values to a greater degree than Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich. We're more in line with what we know about Army values than Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich is. He's the guy that does not share Army values. You think about the role of faith in the life of the military. The first thing that George Washington did when he became the commander of the Continental Army, first thing he did was appoint chaplains. He would give direct orders to his troops that they were to attend divine service. He wouldn't let his soldiers swear. No profanity. He caught two guys in the act of having homosexual sex. He literally drummed them out of the United States Army, out of the Continental Army. I mean, literally, he lined up everybody in two rows and marched these guys right out between these two rows while the drums were banging, where the drummers were banging on their drums. He literally drummed them out of the military. And we know that the Army prizes family. They know that stable families mean stable soldiers. It keeps them focused. It keeps them strong. That's what they're fighting for. You know, in a Republican form of government, we fight not what is in front of us. We do not fight against what is in front of us. We fight for what is behind us. So guys that have families, they're motivated to protect what they have back in the States. Now, Jan Bryan is a call screener and co-producer along with Jeff Reed of the program here. And Jan, I asked you today to see if we get somebody from the Pentagon, get Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich on here to explain his email. We wanted to give him the courtesy of coming on and explaining this to ourselves and to our listening audience. And if we couldn't get him to go to the Pentagon, so tell me what kind of luck you had getting somebody to speak for the military here.
Well, I batted about 0 on that little chore, but I started with the Pentagon, and I made a couple of different calls and was referred around and around and around and left messages. Have not received any kind of call back from anybody, could not get anybody to comment on it whatsoever. So I called Fort Campbell.
Which is where Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich is stationed? That's
right, and I spoke with a really nice lady that was very overwhelmed with calls that had come in this morning about the subject, and she referred me to the public affairs officer. She said he was in a meeting, that they were working on a statement that would be released sometime hopefully after lunch. And she told me that, I asked her, you know, how would it be released? How could I get a copy? She had no idea. She was just really at a loss for what to do.
Well, you know, and so that tells me, Jan, I mean, that tells me if she's overwhelmed with phone calls and they've got people huddled in a room trying to come up with some kind of a statement for the press, then Todd Starnes and AFA working together, we have made an issue out of this, and the Army is scrambling to cover their fannies here.
It was very evident that she knew exactly what I was talking about when I began to explain what I wanted, and she told me that if I would call back after lunch, which they're Eastern time, so I called back just a little while ago, expecting for her to be able to tell me something about the statement, and she said, "Ma'am, we have nothing." And I said, "Do you have any idea when it will be coming out?" She said, "All I know at this point is that we have nothing."
And you actually called Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich's office.
I did. I left, I called his office, and it rung probably 20 times. No voicemail ever came on. Nothing.
Okay. All right, Jan.
Nobody home.
Well, listen, thank you very much for doing that. And Jan's going to keep an eye on that. If we wind up getting a statement from them, we'll try to get that to you. So, again, Yeah, Jan Brand, my producer, she's out there talking to the Pentagon, their media relations people, nothing. No answer, no response back. She talks to a George Wright, who's at the Pentagon. He's their media relations guy. No response back at all. Calls Fort Campbell, where Jack Rich is stationed. Talks to Gloria. She's overwhelmed. We're working on a statement. Don't have it for you. Calls just a little like, we got nothing for you. We have nothing. So what this tells, and ladies and gentlemen, this, by the way, is an indication. You ought to be encouraged by this, because they know who the American Family Association is, and they know that we're making an issue out of this, and they are running for the tall grass. They're on the run here because they know that this guy, this Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich, stepped in it. I mean, this is a horribly offensive, egregiously offensive email. He begins, page 2, he talks about domestic hate groups. That's where he starts his whole thing with domestic hate groups. And he starts with the anti-gay groups. He said, I got 3 categories of domestic hate groups: anti-gay, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim. Starts off with anti-gay and comes right after the American Family Association. And listen to this. This is an excerpt from the email. The religious right in America has employed a variety of strategies in its efforts to beat back the increasingly confident gay rights movement. One of those has been defamation. So he accuses us of impugning the character of those in the homosexual movement when he spent this whole email defaming us, making false accusations, egregiously, libelously, slanderously false accusations about the AFA. He goes on to say many of its leaders have engaged in the crudest type of name-calling. They have disseminated disparaging, quote, facts, in quotes, about gays that are simply untrue, and then basically accuses us of the equivalent of racism. They make assertions that are remarkably reminiscent of the way white intellectuals and scientists once wrote about the bestial black man and his supposedly threatening sexuality. Well, bottom line here, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich deserves a demotion, and the AFA deserves an apology from the Pentagon. Now, that is what ought to happen, and as Winston Churchill would say, we need action this day. AFA is going to stay on this thing because this is too important to let go. Focal Point AFR Talk, back in 2.